A racist police officer was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his career when he decided to harass a young black girl at an upscale electronics store. His badge was his power until he discovered just whose daughter he had placed in handcuffs. Sarah Johnson loved the rich sin of new electronics, the gleaming displays, and most of all, the looks of joy on customers' faces when they found exactly what they were looking for. At 14, she was already more knowledgeable about the latest gadgets than most of the adult staff at Premier Electronics, and she took pride in helping customers navigate the store's extensive collection of high-end devices. "Excuse me," a middle-aged woman approached Sarah, glancing between two smartphones. "I'm trying to decide which one would be better for my son. He's always taking pictures, but I'm not sure about all these technical specifications." Sarah's face lit up as she tucked a strand of her braided hair behind her ear. "I'd love to help you with that. The one in your right hand has a better camera system, especially in low light. Plus, the image stabilization is incredible, perfect for someone who takes lots of pictures." As Sarah demonstrated the phone's features, she could feel eyes boring into her back. She noticed Officer James Cooper when he first walked in. It was hard to miss his imposing figure in the crisp blue uniform or the way his hand seemed to perpetually rest near his weapon. He'd been watching her for the past 10 minutes, following at what he probably thought was a discreet distance. Sarah tried to focus on her customer, but Cooper's presence made her skin prickle with unease. She'd heard stories about him from other black teenagers in the neighborhood. Cooper had a reputation for stopping black youth, always finding some excuse to check their bags or run their IDs. "That's so helpful," the woman beamed at Sarah. "I'll definitely take this one. Could you ring me up?" "Of course. Right this way to the register." Sarah led the woman toward the checkout counter, very aware of Cooper's footsteps behind them. As Sarah processed the sale, Cooper moved closer, positioning himself near the counter. His presence cast a shadow over what should have been a routine transaction. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she wrapped the phone in premium packaging paper, a Premier Electronics signature touch. "Thank you so much for shopping with us," Sarah said, handing the bag to the satisfied customer. As the woman walked away, Cooper finally made his move. "Quite the performance," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Very convincing." Sarah turned to face him, her employee badge clearly visible on her Premier Electronics polo shirt. "I'm sorry, officer. Is there something I can help you with?" Cooper's eyes narrowed. "You can start by explaining why you're handling such expensive merchandise. Those phones aren't toys, young lady." "I work here," Sarah replied firmly, gesturing to her badge. "I'm helping customers, which is my job." Cooper scoffed. "Right, and I'm the Easter Bunny. Listen, girl, I've been watching you, touching all that expensive merchandise, moving around the store, talking to people. I know what's really going on here." Sarah felt her heart rate increasing, but she kept her voice steady, just like her father had taught her. "Sir, I really do work here. You can ask any of the other employees, or the manager." "A likely story. I've seen your type before, running scams, working in groups. Where's your little friends hiding, planning to create a distraction while you slip something in your pocket?" Cooper took a step closer, his hand still hovering near his weapon. Sarah's throat tightened. She glanced around the store, noticing how other customers were beginning to stare. Some had their phones out, already recording the interaction. She spotted Kevin, one of the senior sales associates, hurrying over. "Officer, there seems to be a misunderstanding," Kevin said, stepping between Cooper and Sarah. "Sarah is one of our best employees. She's absolutely authorized to be here." Cooper turned his steely gaze on Kevin. "Are you her supervisor?" "Well, no, but..." "Then step aside. This is a police matter now." Cooper's voice carried that particular tone of authority that brooked no argument. "And you might want to think carefully about interfering with an investigation." Kevin hesitated, looking between Sarah and Cooper. Sarah could see the conflict in his eyes, the desire to help her warring with the fear of challenging a police officer. "It's okay, Kevin," Sarah said softly, even as her heart hammered in her chest. "I'll call my dad. He'll sort this out." As Sarah reached for her phone, Cooper's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. "Oh, no, you don't. That phone's staying right where it is. For all I know, you're signaling your accomplices." "Officer Cooper." Sarah's voice shook slightly, but she forced herself to maintain eye contact. "You're hurting me. I have the right to call my father." "You have the right to remain silent," Cooper sneered. "That's the only right you need to worry about right now. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." "This is ridiculous," Sarah protested. "I haven't done anything wrong." Cooper's grip tightened. Resisting arrest? Want to add that to shoplifting? Turn around, now. The store had gone eerily quiet, and Sarah could feel dozens of eyes on her as Cooper roughly spun her around. The cold metal of handcuffs bit into her wrists as Cooper clicked them tight. Too tight. Officer, please. Sarah's voice cracked. Check my employee ID. Call the manager. This is all a mistake. Cooper ignored her pleas, patting her down with unnecessary thoroughness. Interesting how there's no merchandise in your pockets. Yet. Caught you just in time, didn't I? Bet you were waiting for the right moment to stuff something expensive in there. Sarah could feel tears welling up in her eyes, but she blinked them back. She wouldn't cry. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Where's the store manager? Cooper barked at Kevin, who still stood nearby, filming with trembling hands. He's in a meeting, Kevin stammered. But I can call him. Don't bother. Cooper cut him off. I'm taking her down to the station. You can sort it out there. As Cooper began steering Sarah toward the exit, she could hear whispers and murmurs from the gathered crowd. Some had their phones raised, recording everything. Sarah caught fragments of their conversations. She's just a child. Did you see her badge? She works here. Someone call her parents. This isn't right. But no one stepped forward to stop Cooper. His badge was a shield, his authority unquestionable in that moment. Please, Sarah tried one last time as they approached the store entrance. My father, he's going to be very upset about this. Cooper laughed coldly. Oh, I'm sure Daddy will be very upset. They always are, but maybe next time he'll teach you not to steal. Sarah's chin trembled, but she held her head high. She knew her father would come for her, and when he did, Cooper pushed through the automatic doors, parading Sarah past shocked customers entering the store. His police cruiser sat in the prime parking spot right out front, its presence now seeming more menacing than protective. Watch your head, Cooper said with mock politeness as he pushed Sarah toward the back seat. Just before he forced her down, Sarah caught a glimpse of a familiar car pulling into the parking lot. A small smile tugged at her lips. Her father had perfect timing. Cooper noticed her expression change. Something funny? Don't worry, that smile won't last long at the station. Sarah straightened up as much as the handcuffs would allow. No, officer. I was just thinking about how quickly things can change. Is that a threat? Cooper's face darkened. Because I can add that to the charges too. It's not a threat, Sarah replied calmly, even as her heart raced with anticipation. It's just a fact. Things are about to change very quickly. Cooper opened his mouth to respond, but was interrupted by a commanding voice from behind them. Officer Cooper, step away from my daughter immediately. The color drained from Cooper's face as he turned toward the voice. Sarah's smile grew wider. She knew that voice. It was the same voice that read her bedtime stories. The same voice that taught her about business and dignity. The same voice that had always protected her. But Officer Cooper was about to discover that voice belonged to much more than just a concerned father. I make it my business to know the names of officers who patrol near this store. Marcus caught himself, not yet ready to reveal his full hand, especially those with interesting records regarding young black citizens. A small crowd had gathered at the store entrance, phones still recording. Kevin pushed through, clutching a tablet. Mr. Johnson, I have the security footage from the last hour queued up. It shows everything. Cooper's jaw tightened. Store security footage isn't admissible without a warrant? Marcus finished. You're right, but body camera footage is another matter entirely. Your camera is on, isn't it? Officer Cooper, department policy requires it to be activated during all civilian interactions. Cooper's hand moved from his weapon to his chest, where the small camera blinked its red recording light. For the first time, a flicker of genuine concern crossed his face. Sarah, Marcus called to his daughter, his voice softening. Are you hurt? The cuffs are too tight, Sarah replied, maintaining her composure even as tears threatened to spill. And he grabbed my wrist really hard earlier. Marcus's eyes locked onto Cooper. That's assault of a minor, Officer Cooper. Would you like to add that to the growing list of issues we'll be discussing with your superiors? Are you threatening me? Cooper puffed up his chest, falling back on his usual intimidation tactics. Not at all. Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm merely informing you of the consequences of your actions. Now I'll say it one final time. Remove those handcuffs from my daughter. Cooper hesitated, looking between Marcus and the growing crowd of witnesses. His options were rapidly dwindling. With obvious reluctance, he reached for his keys. This isn't over, Cooper muttered as he unlocked the handcuffs. She was behaving suspiciously. By existing while black? Marcus's voice carried just enough for the crowd to hear. Several gasps and murmurs rippled through the onlookers. Sarah rubbed her wrists as soon as they were free, revealing angry red marks where the metal had bit into her skin. Marcus quickly pulled out his phone and took photos of the marks. Daddy. Sarah's voice wavered slightly, her strong facade finally cracking now that she was safe. Marcus wrapped an arm around her shoulders, but his eyes never left Cooper. It's okay, baby girl, but we're not done here. He turned to Kevin. Please call 911 and request a supervising officer, then contact Linda in legal. Cooper's face flushed. You don't have the authority to... I have every authority to report police misconduct. Marcus cut him off. Unless you prefer to call your supervisor yourself and explain why you handcuffed an innocent teenage girl without cause. Kevin was already on the phone, and in the distance more sirens could be heard approaching. Cooper's face cycled through various emotions, anger, fear, uncertainty, as he realized the situation had spiraled far beyond his control. Sarah. Marcus turned to his daughter, his voice gentle but firm. I want you to tell me exactly what happened from the beginning. And Officer Cooper, I suggest you don't interrupt. Your body camera can corroborate her story after all. Sarah took a deep breath and began recounting the events, her voice growing stronger with each word. She described helping the customer with the phone, feeling Cooper watching her, his accusations, and the escalation to her arrest. As she spoke, 2 more police cruisers pulled into the parking lot. A silver-haired officer with captain's bars on his collar stepped out of one vehicle, taking in the scene with obvious concern. Officer Cooper, what's going on here? Before Cooper could respond, Marcus stepped forward. Captain Richards, I believe we met at last month's Community Oversight Board meeting. I'm Marcus Johnson. Recognition flickered across Richards' face. Mr. Johnson, what brings you? Your officer just handcuffed my 14-year-old daughter while she was working her shift at Premier Electronics. Marcus stated flatly. We have multiple witnesses, security footage, and of course, Officer Cooper's own body camera recording. Richards' expression darkened as he turned to Cooper. Is this true? Sir, I had reason to believe. What reason? Marcus interrupted. Please enlighten us all. What exactly made you suspect my daughter? Be specific, Officer Cooper. We're all very interested in your reasoning. Cooper's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The implications of Marcus's question hung heavy in the air. Captain Richards, Marcus continued, I'd like to file a formal complaint, but first I want EMTs to examine my daughter's wrists. Officer Cooper was overzealous with the handcuffs. Richards nodded grimly. Of course. Cooper, give me your body camera, then wait in your cruiser while I sort this out. He turned to the other officer who had arrived with him. Call for medical. As Cooper reluctantly unclipped his camera, Sarah leaned closer to her father. Dad, what about the board meeting? Marcus smiled down at her. Don't worry about that, sweetie. This is more important. He looked back at Cooper, who was slowly walking to his cruiser. Much more important. The EMTs arrived quickly, examining and photographing Sarah's wrists. They noted the marks in their report, adding their observations to the growing pile of evidence. All the while, Marcus worked his phone, sending texts and making brief calls. Mr. Johnson, Captain Richards approached after speaking with several witnesses. Could we continue this discussion somewhere more private? Perhaps inside the store? Marcus nodded. Of course, Sarah, honey, why don't you go with Kevin and get some ice for your wrists? But Dad... It's okay, Marcus assured her. I'll handle this. Kevin, could you also pull up the security footage for the captain? As Kevin led Sarah inside, Marcus turned to Captain Richards. Shall we? I believe the manager's office will be appropriate for this discussion. Richards gestured for Marcus to lead the way, but as they walked toward the store entrance, Marcus paused. One moment, Captain. He turned toward Cooper's cruiser, where the officer sat stewing in the driver's seat. Officer Cooper, Marcus called out, his voice carrying across the parking lot. I want you to remember this moment. Remember how easily power can shift, how quickly authority can be challenged, how swiftly justice can come calling. He straightened his tie. But most importantly, remember that the next time you profile someone based on their race, you never know who they might be. With that, Marcus turned and walked into the store, leaving Cooper to contemplate his words. The automatic doors slid shut behind them, but through the glass, Cooper could see Marcus being greeted with obvious deference by the store staff. For the first time that day, real fear began to creep into Cooper's mind. Who exactly was Marcus Johnson, and what was about to happen in that manager's office? The answers to those questions would change everything, not just for Officer Cooper, but for the entire department. But for now, Cooper could only wait, watching as Marcus disappeared into the back of the store, taking Cooper's fate with him. Captain Richards settled into one of the plush chairs in the manager's office, his expression grave as he reviewed the security footage on Kevin's tablet. The footage played in silence, showing Sarah helping customers, Cooper's stalking behavior, and the escalating confrontation. As the video ended, Richards looked up to find Marcus on his phone, typing rapidly. "Mr. Johnson, I want to assure you that—" The office door opened, cutting him off. A sharp-dressed woman in a tailored suit entered, followed by 3 distinguished-looking executives. "Sorry we're late, Marcus. Traffic was terrible." "Thank you for coming so quickly, Linda," Marcus replied, then turned to Richards. "Captain, allow me to introduce Linda Chen, Premier Electronics Chief Legal Officer, and these are Robert Martinez, James Wilson, and Dr. Diana Patel, members of our board of directors." Richards's eyes widened slightly. "Board of directors?" "Yes." Marcus smiled, adjusting his tie. "I should probably properly introduce myself. I'm Marcus Johnson, CEO and majority owner of Premier Electronics, all 237 stores nationwide." The color drained from Richard's face as the implications sank in. Cooper hadn't just harassed any black teenager. He'd profiled, assaulted, and handcuffed the daughter of one of the city's most powerful business leaders. "Now," Marcus continued, his voice taking on an edge of steel, "let's discuss how we're going to address Officer Cooper's actions and the broader issues they represent." Linda Chen opened her briefcase, removing several folders. "We've already compiled an initial report, security footage, witness statements, and photographs of Sarah's injuries. But what's most interesting is Officer Cooper's body camera footage." She connected a laptop to the office's large wall monitor. Cooper's body camera recording began to play, showing his perspective as he entered the store. His immediate focus on Sarah was obvious, as was his dismissal of her employee badge and the attempts by other staff to verify her employment. "The audio is particularly revealing," Linda noted, increasing the volume. Cooper's voice filled the room. "I know your type. Running scams. Where's your little friends hiding?" Richards winced at the obvious racial undertones in Cooper's comments. The video continued, showing the escalating situation, Cooper's aggressive handling of Sarah, and the too tight handcuffs. "Captain," Marcus leaned forward, "this isn't an isolated incident. We've had multiple reports about Officer Cooper's behavior toward young black customers in our stores. Today, he picked the wrong target. Not because of who I am, but because this kind of profiling is wrong, period." Dr. Patel, who had been quietly taking notes, spoke up. "We've analyzed customer complaints from all our locations. There's a disturbing pattern of law enforcement profiling young black shoppers. Today's incident is simply the most egregious example. Which is why," Marcus continued, "we're prepared to take significant action. Linda?" The lawyer produced another document. "We're filing a formal complaint against Officer Cooper, including charges of assault on a minor false arrest and civil rights violations. We're also preparing a broader civil suit examining the department's patterns and practices." Richard started to protest, but Marcus held up a hand. "However, we're willing to take a different approach if the department is ready to make real changes." "What kind of changes?" Richards asked cautiously. "First," Marcus ticked off points on his fingers, "immediate suspension of Officer Cooper, pending a full investigation of his conduct, including a review of all previous complaints against him." "That's already in motion," Richards assured him, "given this evidence." "Second," Marcus continued, "we want mandatory sensitivity training for all officers, developed in conjunction with community leaders and civil rights experts. Premier Electronics will fund it." Robert Martinez, one of the board members, pulled out a tablet. "We've already drafted a preliminary program. It's been successful in other cities where we operate." "Third," Marcus pressed on, "we want a permanent community oversight board with real power, not just advisory capacity. Again, we're willing to provide resources and support." James Wilson opened his portfolio. "We have case studies from cities where similar boards have significantly reduced incidents of racial profiling and improved police-community relations." Richards looked overwhelmed. "Mr. Johnson, while I appreciate these suggestions, I'm not sure I have the authority to. You don't, Marcus agreed. But I have a meeting with the mayor and police commissioner in 1 hour. They're very interested in discussing these proposals, especially given the media attention this incident will receive. As if on cue, Linda's phone buzzed. The video of Sarah's arrest is trending on social media. Local news stations are requesting comments. Which brings me to my fourth point. Marcus stood, straightening his jacket. Premier Electronics will be launching a national campaign against racial profiling in retail environments. We're prepared to commit significant resources to this initiative. The question is, will your department be featured as part of the problem or part of the solution? Richards ran a hand over his face. You've clearly thought this through. I've been thinking about this since the first time I was followed around a store as a young black man, Marcus replied. The only difference is now I have the power to do something about it. Sarah's experience today, that ends now. The office door opened again and Sarah entered with Kevin. The marks on her wrists were now clearly visible, dark bruises forming where the handcuffs had been too tight. Dad? Sarah's voice was steady. The news vans are outside. They want to talk to us. Marcus gently touched her wrists, his expression hardening as he examined the bruises. Captain Richards, I believe we need your decision now. Will you work with us on meaningful reform, or shall we take this discussion to the media and the courts? Richards stood, his decision visible in his posture. Reform, but I want to be clear. This isn't because of your position or influence, Mr. Johnson. This is because what happened to your daughter was wrong, and it shouldn't happen to anyone else's child. Finally, Marcus smiled, something we completely agree on. He turned to Linda. Please show the captain our proposed oversight board structure. Sarah, honey, come with me. Officer Cooper needs to understand exactly who he profiled today. Sarah fell into step beside her father as they walked through the store. Employees and customers parted before them, many filming with their phones. Through the glass doors, they could see Cooper still sitting in his cruiser, looking increasingly nervous as news vans set up their equipment. Officer Cooper? Marcus called out as they stepped into the parking lot. A moment of your time? Cooper reluctantly emerged from his cruiser, his earlier arrogance replaced by visible anxiety. Camera crews rushed to capture the confrontation. Officer Cooper, Marcus's voice carried clearly in the afternoon air. You caused my daughter physical and emotional distress today because you saw a young black person in an upscale store and assumed she was a criminal. Would you like to know what she was actually doing here? Cooper swallowed hard but said nothing. Sarah wasn't just helping customers. She was learning the family business. You see, I founded Premier Electronics 20 years ago, built it from one store into a national chain. Every Saturday, I bring my daughter to work so she can learn every aspect of the business she'll one day inherit. The revelation hit Cooper like a physical blow. Camera flashes exploded around them as photographers captured his expression. That employee badge you ignored. It should have read Sarah Johnson, Executive Management Trainee. The merchandise you accused her of plotting to steal? She helped select our inventory. The manager you demanded to see? He reports to my board of directors. Marcus stepped closer, his voice low but intense. But here's what really matters, Officer Cooper. None of that should make a difference. You shouldn't need to know that I own this store to treat my daughter with basic human dignity. You shouldn't need to know that I have the power to end your career to do your job without racial bias. Sarah stepped forward, holding up her bruised wrist for the cameras. How many other kids have you hurt, Officer Cooper? How many didn't have a father who could make you stop? Cooper's face had gone ashen. Mr. Johnson, Save it, Marcus cut him off. Your body camera recorded everything, the racial assumptions, the excessive force, the dismissal of evidence that didn't fit your biased narrative. It's all there, and it's all going to be reviewed, along with every complaint ever filed against you. Marcus turned to address the gathered media directly. Today, Premier Electronics is announcing a zero-tolerance policy for racial profiling in our stores. We're committing $50 million to police reform initiatives and community oversight programs nationwide. Officer Cooper's actions were wrong, but they're just a symptom of a deeper problem, one we're now committed to solving. He wrapped an arm around Sarah's shoulders. My daughter was racially profiled and assaulted today, but because of my position, we have the power to create real change. We intend to use that power to protect every child who enters our stores, whether they're a CEO's daughter or not. As reporters shouted questions and cameras flashed, Cooper slumped against his cruiser, his career visibly crumbling around him, but Marcus wasn't finished. Officer Cooper, he called out one last time, you're suspended pending investigation, but I want you to do one thing during your suspension. I want you to visit every premier electronics store in this city. Look at the photos that will be hanging in their entrances. Photos of Sarah's bruised wrists. Let them remind you and everyone else that power doesn't make right and justice doesn't depend on status. 3 months later, the changes were already visible. Officer Cooper had been terminated following a comprehensive review of his conduct. The new Community Oversight Board was actively working with the police department, and reported incidents of racial profiling had dropped significantly. Premier Electronics' anti-profiling campaign had sparked similar initiatives nationwide, and every Saturday, Sarah Johnson still worked at the store, helping customers find exactly what they needed. But now her employee badge proudly displayed her full name and title. She'd insisted on keeping the same badge design as other employees, though. After all, as she often reminded her father, it wasn't about status or power. It was about justice, dignity, and making sure no other child would feel the cold bite of handcuffs simply for existing while black in an upscale store. The security footage of that day played on a loop in police training sessions across the country, a powerful reminder that prejudice has consequences, justice can wear unexpected faces, and change begins with a single moment of standing up for what's right.